At 52, he did what most men only dream about. He looked at his marriage of 27 years, looked at the life he'd built, looked at the peace he'd lost somewhere along the way, and he walked away. No affair, no drama, no explosive fight. He just chose himself. And everyone told him he was making the biggest mistake of his life. That was 3 years ago. Today, I'm going to show you what his life actually looks like now. Not the nightmare people predicted, not the fantasy Instagram sells. The real truth about what happens when a man finally chooses his own peace over everyone else's expectations. Stay with me. Introduction. The decision. Let me tell you about Michael. That's not his real name. But his story is real, and it's one I've heard variations of dozens of times from men over 50. Michael got married at 25, did everything society told him to do, built a career, provided for his family, put his wife's needs first, put his kids' needs first, put everyone's needs first. And somewhere between year 10 and year 25, he stopped recognizing himself in the mirror. He wasn't happy, but he wasn't miserable either. He was just existing, functioning, going through the motions, playing the role of husband, provider, father, doing it well, by all accounts. But inside, empty. At 52, after the kids had grown and moved out, after another argument that felt like a rerun of 1,000 arguments before it, after another night lying awake wondering, is this really all there is? Something shifted. He realized he'd spent 27 years building a life that looked good on paper but felt hollow in his chest. And he made a decision that terrified him. He walked away. Not because he hated his wife. Not because there was someone else. Not because of any dramatic reason people could understand. He walked away because he needed to find out who he was when he wasn't performing for anyone. 3 years later, here's what his life actually looks like. Part 1. The first year, the shock. The first year was brutal. Not because he regretted the decision, but because suddenly, for the first time in 3 decades, there was silence. No one needing anything from him. No expectations to meet. No role to perform. No performance to maintain. Just silence. And in that silence, all the questions he'd been avoiding for years came flooding in. Who am I without the marriage? Who am I without the role of provider? What do I actually want? What do I actually enjoy? What matters to me when I'm not trying to make someone else happy? He didn't have answers. And that was terrifying. But here's what he did have. Time. Energy. Mental space. The ability to think his own thoughts without filtering them through someone else's needs. That first year he lived small. A simple apartment. Minimal expenses. He wasn't trying to recreate the big life he'd left. He was trying to figure out what a real life, his life, actually looked like. He lost some friends. The couples who couldn't handle his single status. The people who took his wife's side without asking his. The ones who saw his choice as a threat to their own comfortable unhappiness. But he also gained something unexpected, clarity. For the first time in decades, his calendar was his own. His money was his own. His time was his own. His peace was his own. And slowly, very slowly, he started to remember what it felt like to be himself. Part 2. Year 2, the rebuilding. By year 2, something interesting happened. Michael stopped defending his decision. Stopped explaining himself to people who couldn't understand. Stopped feeling guilty for choosing himself. And he started building. He reconnected with hobbies he'd abandoned 25 years earlier. He started hiking again. Something he used to love but gave up because she didn't enjoy it. He picked up his guitar. He started reading actual books instead of falling asleep to Netflix. He made new friends. Real friends. Not couple friends. Not obligation friends. Men who were on their own journeys of self-discovery. Men who understood what it meant to walk away from comfortable misery toward uncomfortable freedom. His finances stabilized. Without the constant spending pressure of maintaining appearances and meeting someone else's lifestyle expectations, he found he needed far less than he thought. He traveled, not expensive resort vacations, solo trips to places he'd always wanted to see, backpacked through Colorado, a month in a cabin in Montana, simple, meaningful travel that was about experience, not Instagram. And something unexpected happened. His relationship with his adult children improved. Without the tension of the marriage coloring every interaction, without him playing the role of keeping family peace, his kids got to know him as an actual person. Not just Dad the provider, but Michael the man. They respected him more, not less, because they saw him choose authenticity over comfort. And that gave them permission to do the same in their own lives. Before I show you what year 3 looks like, and this is where it gets really interesting, I need you to do something. If you're watching this and thinking this is my story or this could be my story, hit that subscribe button right now. This channel exists to tell the real stories that men over 50 actually live but rarely hear validated. Every subscription helps this reach more men who are sitting in quiet misery, wondering if there's another way. Subscribe now. Hit that like button. And let me show you what happens in year 3. So here's what Michael's life looks like today, 3 years after walking away. He lives in a small house he bought outright. No mortgage. No debt. Financial peace he never had during the marriage. He works part-time as a consultant in his field, makes enough for his simple lifestyle. Has time for everything that actually matters to him. His days? He wakes up when his body wants to wake up. Not to an alarm for someone else's schedule. He drinks his coffee in silence. He reads. He hikes 3 to 4 times a week. He plays guitar. He volunteers at a local community center teaching kids woodworking. His evenings? Sometimes he meets friends for dinner. Sometimes he's completely alone. Both are good, because both are his choice. He dates occasionally. Casually. No pressure to make it serious. No need to find someone to complete him because he's already complete. And here's the most important thing. He has peace. Not excitement. Not constant happiness. Not the Instagram version of an amazing life. Peace. He wakes up without anxiety. He goes to bed without resentment. He moves through his days without performing for anyone. Is his life exciting by conventional standards? No. Is his life successful by society's definition? Probably not. But is his life his? Finally, genuinely, actually his? Yes. Part 4. What he learned. Michael told me something I'll never forget. He said, "The scariest part wasn't leaving. The scariest part was realizing how long I'd stayed, how many years I traded for comfort, how much of myself I gave away without even realizing I was doing it." He learned that most men in unhappy marriages aren't staying for love. They're staying for the fear of financial devastation, the fear of loneliness, the fear of judgment, the fear of the unknown, the fear of being seen as a failure, the fear of disappointing people who never prioritized his happiness anyway. But here's what he discovered. The devastation he feared was temporary. The loneliness he feared was actually solitude, and solitude became his greatest gift. The judgment he feared? It said more about other people's insecurities than his choices. And the failure narrative? That was other people's story. His story was finally choosing himself after 27 years of choosing everyone else. He doesn't tell men to leave their marriages. That's not the point. The point is this. If you're living a life that's making you smaller, quieter, less yourself every year, at some point, you have to ask if security is worth your soul. Part 5. The unexpected truth. Here's what Michael says now, 3 years later. I wish I'd done it 10 years earlier. Not because those 10 years in the marriage were wasted, but because he spent those 10 years knowing something was wrong and staying anyway. Out of fear, out of guilt, out of the belief that his needs didn't matter as much as everyone else's. Now at 55, he's building the second half of his life on a foundation of authenticity rather than obligation. He's not rich. He's not famous. He's not living some fantasy life. But he's free. And he's himself. And after 27 years of being neither, that's everything. So let me ask you something. Do you see yourself in Michael's story? Are you living a life that looks good on paper but feels hollow inside? Are you performing a role that stopped fitting years ago? Are you staying because of genuine love or because of fear? These aren't comfortable questions, but they're necessary ones. Because here's the truth. Michael isn't special. He didn't have some unique courage that you don't have. He didn't have a better financial situation. He didn't have fewer responsibilities. He just reached a point where the pain of staying became greater than the fear of leaving. And maybe you're at that point right now. Maybe you've been at that point for years. Or maybe you're not. Maybe your marriage is good. Maybe you're choosing to stay from genuine commitment, not quiet desperation. Either way, Michael's story teaches us something crucial. Your life is yours, not your wife's, not your kids', not society's. Yours. And at some point, you have to decide if you're living it or performing it. Now, here's what I need from you. First, subscribe to this channel. Right now. Because every week I tell real stories like Michael. Stories of men over 50 making hard choices, rebuilding after loss, choosing themselves after decades of choosing everyone else. These aren't motivational speeches. These aren't fantasy success stories. These are real lives, real decisions, real consequences, both good and hard. If you want more truth and less performance, subscribe now. Second, hit that like button. Because that like tells YouTube that real stories matter, that men over 50 deserve content that speaks to their actual lives, not some idealized version of masculinity. Your like literally determines whether this story reaches the man who needs to hear it today. Third, comment below and answer this honestly. If you could walk away from your current life and rebuild from scratch, would you? What would your life look like? What are you afraid of losing? What would you finally gain? Your honest answer might be exactly what another man needs to read to give himself permission to choose his own peace. And fourth, share this with someone. You know who. The friend who's been unhappy for years but won't admit it. The brother who's slowly disappearing into his obligations. The colleague who's counting down days instead of living them. Send them this video. Don't explain it. Just say, this reminded me of our conversation. Worth watching. Here's the bigger picture. Michael's story is about walking away from marriage. But the deeper truth applies to everything. Any life built on obligation instead of authenticity will eventually collapse. The only question is whether you rebuild consciously or wait for it to crumble. This channel is about that rebuilding. About men over 50 who are finally asking, what do I actually want? And having the courage to answer honestly. Every video is another piece of that puzzle. Another real story. Another hard truth. Another permission slip to choose yourself. Subscribe and stay with us. Because whether you walk away like Michael or stay and rebuild within your marriage, the question is the same. Are you living your life? Or are you performing someone else's script? Michael chose to live. 3 years later, he's never looked back. What will you choose? Subscribe, like, comment, share. And most importantly, ask yourself the question that changes everything. Is this really all there is? Because if the answer is no, what are you going to do about it? I'll see you in the next one.